Hey guys, it's Trail over to Go Hunt. As our second part in the series about elk, I wanted to talk about when to hunt elk, which sounds like kind of a silly question because obviously the time to hunt elk is when you got a tag in your pocket and the season dates. But more specifically, we get asked questions quite a bit about when to hunt. If you've got maybe 8 or 10 days off of work and you want to go elk hunting, we get asked quite a bit, when are the best times to go hunt elk? So we wanted to address that and just cover some tips and tricks and hopefully help somebody out on selecting a day or a time frame to go and hunt elk. So with that, I wanted to dive in first with the August opener. Some states like Utah, even Nevada's got some units, if you're lucky enough to draw a tag, that will open up in August. August is a great time, in my opinion, to target and hunt a specific bull. So if you're lucky enough to draw that Utah limited entry archery elk tag and it opens in August, for the most part, those bulls, the tail end of August, are still in bachelor groups. They're still in their summer range and their patterns. They're a little bit more patternable. They're typically easier to see. And in my opinion, it's a great time to hunt and target a specific bull that you've scouted. I would suggest during that August time frame, you've got maybe about a week to 2 week window towards the tail end of August before you hit the first part of September, where those bulls are still pretty much in their same summer pattern, and you can really target using spot and stalk techniques. You can ambush hunt over a water hole. You can ambush as those bulls are coming or going from a bedding area or a feeding area. And in my opinion, if you're lucky enough, like I said, you've got that tag in your pocket, you really want to focus on a specific bull that you've scouted and hunted. August, that end of August is a really critical time frame, and I think there's a lot of big bulls that get killed during that window because, like I said, you can really target them that time of year. So that's something to think about if you're lucky enough to have a tag that opens up in August. As you move into September, you get into that pre-rut stage, and the pre-rut I would probably identify as really that 1st of September into maybe the 10th of September. And it's kind of that staging time frame as those bulls are moving, they're cutting country, and they're looking for cows and calves. They're really kind of setting themselves up for that prime rut date, which I'll talk about here in a second. One of the advantages of hunting that time frame is that potentially you'll have less pressure in the field because a lot of people, they want to hunt the heart of the rut. So that heart of the rut is typically going to be maybe the 15th through the 25th of September. A lot of people want to go out, they want to call elk, they want to hear elk bugle. And if you take those days, maybe the 1st through the 10th of September to hunt, the likelihood that you're going to get into a real rut fest isn't nearly as good. In saying that, the potential for less hunting pressure in the field is better. So you got to think about that, and I think a lot of people kind of gravitate towards that, increasingly more so in my opinion. During that time frame, really your tactics kind of need to switch. Calling may work, but it may not be as effective as it's going to be later in the September. I would say challenge bugles, those kinds of things maybe aren't quite as effective. Maybe just a locator, some cow calls. You might be able to tease a bull to come in to check out a cow call or a calf call. And again, this is just kind of my experience hunting during that time frame. One of my favorite times or ways to hunt elk during that early September time frame is hunting over a wallow. So that first week of September is kind of a critical period for bulls. They're going to come in, they're going to start hitting wallows, they're going to lay down on those things and urinate in them, and they're going to really get themselves muddy and really start to advertise themselves to those cows. You know, I'm a big bull, I'm ready to rut, and they really like to start hitting those first weeks of September. So hunting over water or a wallow during that time frame can be very effective. Again, I should have prefaced this whole entire thing with elk are typically active morning and evening. During that August time frame when it's hot, they're probably only active maybe an hour after first light because they're trying to conserve energy, want to stay out of the sun, and then maybe potentially an hour before sun starts to set. As you move more into that September time frame, elk are going to be a little bit more active. Those bulls are going to be cruising country. They're going to be looking more for cows. So there is a little bit more activity on either end of early morning light and before dark. One of the things I like to do is look at harvest statistics for various hunts. And I think there's a good case study to be looked at in the state of New Mexico, where you've typically got 2 archery hunts, an early archery hunt that's running from the 1st through maybe the 14th of September, and then a second archery hunt, which is typically like the 15th through the 24th. As you look through those harvest statistics, in a lot of cases, the early archery hunt has as good or better harvest statistics than the prime rut dates. Certainly you get a few more days to hunt, but in my opinion, I think that, guys are getting out, they're sitting water, they're sitting wallows, maybe they're using a cow call to lure a bull in that's just starting to cruise country and look for cows. And I think you can be extremely effective during that time frame, but realize you're probably not going to get into the heart of the rut. You're not going to hear bulls just absolutely screaming all day long for the most part. Moving into what I would suggest is the best time to hunt elk with a bow. People often ask me, if I had 10 days to take off, what would you pick? My preference is always about that 15th of September through about the 25th of September. I really think that's when most of your cows are starting to cycle, they're coming into estrus, and those bulls are starting to rut, and I really feel like somewhere within that window, you're going to hit the peak of the rut. And that's when it's just really fun to be out hunting elk with your bow. The bulls are bugling, they're really getting after it, they're rutting, they're more active throughout the day. You may get onto a bull in the morning that's bugling at first light. You may kind of follow him and keep up with him and bugle and work that calling sequence until midday. There's a lot of times when I've been hunting within that window where I've had bulls bugling pretty much the entire day. It's a really, really fun time to be in the woods hunting elk. In my opinion, it can be a really tough time frame to hunt a specific bull because they really do move and cover a lot of country. It can be really hard to keep up with a specific bull. But I do really like that window in time for hunting elk with a bow. You can be extremely effective with your call. If you don't want to call, you're not a great caller. I'm personally not a great caller. It's still a really good opportunity to send out a locator bugle or a cow call, get those bulls talking, and just work your way in and sneak in on them. I should note that within this time window, I really feel like one of my very favorite times and tactics to hunt a bull is kind of that midday. And I'm talking mostly from maybe 10 o'clock, mid-morning, until even like those afternoon hours. And the reason I like that time frame is because those bulls in the morning, they'll have got up, they'll start to move with their cow and calf herd. They'll be bugling, they'll be kind of moving and feeding, and they're headed towards a bedding area. And sometimes it might be 2, 3, 4 miles from where they've started to feed to where they end up bedding. And it can be hard to keep up with them. In a lot of cases, it feels like you may never catch that herd, but they will eventually be heading towards a bedding area. And that's a great opportunity to slip in that mid-afternoon or even early afternoon and just work in on a herd that's eventually slowed down, bedded, and call a bull away from the herd, or even just sneak in. I've had a lot of cases where I've just snuck into that herd waiting for the afternoon. The bull's got up and he's kind of piping off and just testing the waters before the rest of the herd got up. It's a great opportunity to just slip inside that herd really stealthily, or even just cow call a bull off of his herd. So I really like that midday when the elk are really, really rutting hard. All right, so like I said, that's my very favorite time to hunt elk, that 15th through about the 25th of September. I think that's the heart of the rut. It's my very favorite time to be in the elk woods, and you might have some more added hunting pressure depending on the tag that you have, but it is my very, very favorite time to be out bow hunting elk. As you move towards the tail end of September and the early parts of October, a lot of the rut will have peaked and kind of started to peter off at the end. A lot of those bulls, the bigger bulls, will be starting to transition away from the cow-calf herds. You're still very likely to hear some bugling, so it's not a bad idea if you've got an early October rifle tag. As you move into the middle of October, I still think it's a really good idea to have a cow call and potentially a bugle in your pack. I've hunted some early rifle hunts in Colorado where the rut's actually been really good, as you've had some cows that have come into second cycle estrus and the bulls are really piping off. So I think it's a good time to still have a call, but for the most part, October time frame is really a transition for most bulls away from the cow-calf herds. They're starting to regroup into bachelor herds, and they're really just trying to put on weight and trying to make it through the winter. So their primary focus is packing on calories. They're going to find little remote pockets. They're going to find good feed. They're going to tuck themselves in, and they're going to get up and they're going to feed in the morning. They're going to get up and feed before dark. They're probably not nearly as active as they are during the rut, just because they're trying to maintain their security, and they're not trying to move a whole bunch, but they're just trying to pack on calories. I would suggest as you move into that time frame, specifically for a rifle hunt, your very best tactics are maybe a cow call or a bugle to locate. But for the most part, I'm relying on spot and stock. So I'm finding the glassing points, especially in the morning. I think that's key. And then glassing those bulls up as they're moving towards bedding areas, and then slipping in and in a lot of cases just waiting for the afternoon to kind of develop and have those bulls come feeding out of their bedding areas, and then just making a play on them at that point. So I think that's a really good opportunity. Sometimes late season elk hunting is what I like to call a slow play. You might glass them in the morning. It might take you all day to get yourself in location and in proximity to those elk as they feed out to get a rifle shot. Slow play them. It might take you a full day to kill a bull, but it definitely pays off. Like I said, they're a lot less active. They're primarily going to be out feeding early morning, late evening, right before dark. And that's primarily as you move into that October, November time frame. It's pretty much the same as those late October, mid-October hunts. Those elk are bachelored up. The bulls are moved off into their own little pockets. The biggest bulls are really looking for seclusion. They don't want to have to move a lot to get good feed. They're just trying to pack on calories. Late in the season, south slopes are going to become important, especially if you've got snow on the ground, because the sun's going to burn off those slopes. It's going to expose those grasses. Elk might feed a little bit longer during that time frame just to get that sunlight on them, get some body heat going. But for the most part, they're not going to feed all day on those open slopes. They're still going to move back to cover. And once again, you're primarily hunting early morning, afternoons, just before dark. And like I said, one of my very favorite methods on late season rifle hunts is to use that slow play. You know, glass them in the morning when they're up feeding, kind of work them into their bedding areas, anticipate where they're going to feed out in the afternoon, and being in range of where they're coming out in the evening. So hopefully some of these tips will help you. Elk timing, when to hunt is definitely something that you want to consider when you're planning out your hunt. You can be effective, you can kill an elk throughout the different seasons. You just kind of have to adjust your tips and your tactics. So try that. If you got any questions, drop them in the comments below. I'd love to hear any other information you guys have in regards to when you hunt elk. But man, it's almost time to get out and get scouting and start looking for some elk.